Okie doke, thank you for joining us this Thursday morning as we dig into the papers. But even before we're joined by policy analyst with Imani Africa, Selom Brantier, I want to put something to you because it's a question we're posing to you later on the show. It has to do with press freedom. You've seen the latest ranking and what it says about where we find ourselves when it comes to press freedom. I've heard from the boss of the National Media Commission, who puts things in a pretty different light, so to speak. I've heard from the NDC on this. I've heard from the NPP on this. We've heard from Yawabena Samwa. And we also have Kojo Nkrumah, who has put a few things out there as well, the Minister of Information. And he has pointed to a few facts, and I'll be running them by Selom Brantier. But he talks about the legal framework, or basically the reference points for the Reporters Without Borders and why their new methodology and other factors may have impacted this decision. But it's interesting because even when he talks about the scores and rankings and when he talks about the 5 parameters assessed under the new methodology, he says that Ghana scored appreciably high on 4 of them out of the 5. It's only when it comes to the economic situation of media people that we did not score well. That's the figure we got. So he points out that as far as the legal framework is concerned, we scored 81.42% and social-cultural context, 79.64%. Ghana also recorded above average and moderately high scores for political context, 66.61%, and safety of journalists, 62.25%. The safety of journalists bits, yeah, I'm also... But anyway, the only parameter in which Ghana performed below average was economic context, 47.22%. And according to him, this refers to the economic conditions of journalists on one hand and financial stability of media houses. He makes other points in this release, but I have a question for Kojo Nkrumah and for Yawabena Samwa. For us journalists, and Kojo, you have been here before, for us journalists, do we need anybody to tell us when things are going well? Do we? I mean, we are in the soup. We are here. Do we need someone to tell us that, oh, and I say or something of the sort? I'm just saying, I'm just asking an open question. What do you think out there from what you've seen? And others cite happenings like what we saw with Ahmed Hussein Swale. Till today, we don't know what happened to him, who gunned him down, those shots in his chest and his neck and other parts of his body. We've received promise upon promise, and especially when you consider that a certain member of parliament, I just want to refrain from mentioning his name, went on a platform and said, you know what, find this guy, beat him up, do all kinds of things to him. And today, he rests with the ancestors. It's also interesting when you take the perspectives of other people in the media space. Manasseh Azure Awene, he has a lengthy piece on that. You can check it out on the Fourth Estate. But he tweets a short bit, which I think succinctly reflects what he thinks. He says, I have been doing journalism since Kufuor. And in my view, Akufo-Addo's era, I beg your pardon, is the worst for journalists in Ghana. So at the tail end of the show, we ask you, do you concur, do you agree, or do you not? When Selom joins me, we'll get into some of those matters. But let's dig into the papers now. The Daily Graphic newspaper, salary demands job security. 5 labor unions call for political will. Let's take some details on that story. And 5 labor unions have urged the government to show genuine political will and honesty to initiate measures to address the appalling conditions of service of workers. They also expressed worry about the general low wages and salaries of workers, saying it was only when the government demonstrated true political will to increase workers' salaries by at least 20% and use social dialogue with labor unions that it could engender the trust needed to resolve the frequent labor unrest. In their view, the government, as an employer, must also show respect to labor unions during negotiations, a cardinal principle in social dialogue. The leaders of the various labor unions said these in interviews with the Daily Graphic during the May Day celebrations at the Black Star Square in Accra last Sunday. So that is a major issue of concern that has come up. And we know these labor issues have been with us for a while now, and we still contemplate them, especially as the TUC, CLOGSAG, and others, well, one party wanting a neutrality allowance and others saying, up the ante, give us COLA, cost of living allowance, of up to 20%, which will be reflective or commensurable with the inflationary rates. Supreme Court throws out injunction on Elevy. I'll get to that story shortly. Memphis honors Ghana at festival. Asantehene given rousing welcome. But let's do the story on page 16 and the one on page 20 before we shove off and get into other stories. So this one says, Supreme Court throws out injunction on Elevy. You may have heard by now, and it has dismissed an interlocutory injunction application by 3 members of parliament, which sought to temporarily put the implementation of the electronic transfer levy on hold. Led by the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu, the 3 NDC MPs wanted the court to halt the implementation of the e-levy pending the final determination of their suit, challenging the constitutionality of its passage by Parliament. The other MPs are Mahama Yariga, MP for Boku Central, and Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa, MP for North Tongue. However, in a unanimous decision yesterday, a 7-member panel of the Apex Court held that putting an injunction on the e-levy would occasion irreparable harm to the state and would not be in the public interest. To quote them, they say, in our opinions, greater hardship will be caused to the state in meeting its developmental obligations to the people, the court held. And so that is the situation, but the substantive case remains in court, and we'll see how that pans out. The 3 NDC MPs argue that there were 136 or a purported 137 MPs present during the passage of the e-levy. How will it pan out? The Apex Court will tell us with time. But as of now, they say it will cause great hardship to the state. I'm sure some may be thinking, how about the great hardship to the citizens? And who makes up the state? Ghana can reverse press index ranking. That's according to President of the GJA, Dr. Afeo Money. He says he knew there were problems, but he did not anticipate the country's huge decline on the World Press Freedom Index, even in a, quote, confluence of anti-media factors. So, again, I reflect, when even the GJA is saying there are anti-media factors, can we just sit aloof and say, no, everything is fine? Okay, so those are the details from there. Let me also turn to page 20 and get the take of Kojo Opon Kroma, my senior brother, and, of course, Minister of Information. Now, the government remains focused on building collaboration among stakeholders to improve Ghana's ranking on the new model World Press Freedom Index. The Minister of Information, Kojo Opon Kroma, has stated, which is heartwarming. I respect him for that, because when you fail, you must get up again and do the right thing. Now, in a statement to mark World Press Freedom Day yesterday, which is what I was reading to you earlier, he said although the government had taken note of the caution not to compare 2021 and 2022 World Press Freedom rankings, it acknowledged that a lot more was needed to be done by stakeholders to ace Ghana's ranking on the new model. Now, publishers of the ranking announced that they had employed a new methodology which moved Ghana to 60th in the global ranking for 2022, cautioning against the year-on-year comparison. Now, the new methodology takes into account a quantitative survey of press freedom violations and abuses against journalists and the media, and a qualitative study based on the responses of hundreds of press freedom experts selected by Reporters Without Borders, which includes journalists, mind you, journalists, academics, and human rights defenders. That's where we sit on this. Journalists, academics, human rights defenders are those who, in the end, put this together. So what did they see, and what do we see differently? And that also reminds me of a certain Elizabeth Ohene. and what she sent to the BBC in recent times. Manasseh Azuri-Awene, expatiates on some of that as well. So it has become a bit murky, hasn't it? That was why I started by asking, who can really tell? Is it the person in the kitchen feeling the heat, or is it the person outside of the kitchen who is saying, you're not really hot? Who feels the heat? Anyway, so Mr. Nkrumah stressed the importance to step up the country's response by educating state agencies and the public to relate better with journalists, even when they disagreed with their work. Already, he said the government had supported the National Media Commission to establish an office for the coordinated mechanism on the safety of journalists. And even as I say this as well, I want to speak about the Ghana Police Service and the other, those others in our security framework, apparatus. Sometimes the way they treat people, until maybe they find out you're a journalist, then they start, hey, Papa Joy, do you need to know whether or not I am a journalist before you do the right thing? And there was an issue I reported to the Police Professional Standards Bureau. Greetings to the head. Till today, that matter, CCTV things. I'll follow up on the story because anytime I check, but sometimes police and the way you relate to people, all of that is in there. And sometimes you see supposed national security operatives storming radio or TV stations and all of that. How did we even get here? Anyway, so that is that for the Daily Graphic. Just to wrap with this business story, over $300 million worth of gas flared in 2 years. Let's say goodbye to the Daily Graphic and get ready for the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Pardon me, my voice this morning. The Ghanaian Times, at World Press Freedom Day celebrations, anti-media factors caused Ghana's drop from 30th to 60th position on 2022 WPFI, that's according to the GJA president. There's also Supreme Court dismisses interlocutory injunction against application against Elevy, and 600 entities to go on GHNEPS by 2023. Let's check out that story on page 24 before we check out the middle spread of the paper. All right, so we're getting there. We're getting there now. So it says about 600 public entities are expected to be fully operational on the Ghana Electronic Procurement System by October 2023. That's according to the Public Procurement Authority. According to the authority, after October 2023, any entity that is not on the system would be slapped with punitive measures. Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the PPA, Kwame Prempeh, who disclosed these, did not mention the kind of punitive measures, but it was believed such entities would pay huge sums of money to have their staff trained to effectively use the system and be boarded onto the system. On that note, let me say good morning to Mr. Kojo Poku, energy analyst and an aspirant for the NPP's flag bearership slot. Mr. Poku, a very good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Ben. How are you?
Hey, Mr. Poku, mente unkao waneno mente.
Well, Ben, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Hi, sorry. I had a very early meeting, so I've left the house. So it's unfortunate we have to do this thing by phone call.
Right, but it's fine. I mean, we can still catch your thoughts. But thank you so much for joining us. I just want your take very quickly on the latest Press Freedom Index. I'm sure you followed the banter from the different sides, or the discourse, I should say, on the different fronts, and how every group is claiming we're the best, we are more tolerant, and all of that. Manasseh says he felt safer under the previous regime than under this one. In fact, that he's never felt as unsafe under any administration like he has under this one. Is it something you agree with? Because maybe I should just quote what he says, and maybe that would help the discussion. He says, I've been doing journalism since Kufuor, and in my view, Akufo-Addo's era is the worst for journalists in Ghana. Do you agree with him?
Well, I'm not a journalist, and I'm not in his shoes, so I don't know the threats that he faces. But for me, where I sit, I don't honestly think that I would agree with him. That does not mean that he is not going through what he's going through. Look, some of these index and some of these analyst surveys that they do is more of a perception. You know, perception is very key. Now, when a lot of people feel unsafe, it doesn't mean that they are not safe. It's they feel. So it's a perception. Okay? Now, if one or two incidents happen and people now put a spin on it, then it now becomes that, hey, if you do this, this will happen to you. But meanwhile, it's not true. So my problem is the perception. And I think governments have to do a lot more to eradicate or make people feel safer. And I think that is what
quickly,
maybe the problem is.
Sorry to truncate your thoughts, but oftentimes, and I do accept perception is what it is, but oftentimes there is a fine line between perception and reality. Look at the corruption in our system. We cannot perfectly gauge the state of corruption, apart from maybe the Auditor General's report and this and that, and maybe a single country telling you we've imported X amount of gold, which is more than the entire report that we give as a country in terms of what we supply to the rest of the world. Some of those things may be pointers, but when you look at these, can you really say that they are not that reflective? When you consider some of the surveys that have been coming out on corruption, which we see, but there's not much because of the system we operate. And in this sense, the media, I mean, what must we see before we think this is a proper reflection or otherwise?
Well, like I'm saying, look, when somebody has an issue, how it is addressed is also go a long way. Now, Manasseh is unsafe, or he doesn't feel safe. Now, if he doesn't feel safe, has he reported it? How was it treated? When people have concerns, how do you treat the concerns? Is it basically brushed away, or is it dealt with effectively? So I think.
Can I give you a brief answer?
Say that again.
Can I give you a brief answer?
Yes.
All right. So referencing Manasseh, he says when he did the Ford saga, the Ford Explorer story, you remember businessman, I think Burkinabe businessman, Kanazoe, that then information minister, Omanibuama, called him and said, the story, we didn't really, and we feel it will do damage to us. So let's give you police protection per his, latest piece. And he said, I don't need it because I don't feel threatened. He says, juxtaposing that with recent events where he had to even leave the country at a point because he felt unsafe, it's very different for him. That feeling was different then, it's different now. How do you reflect on that? Because that's exactly what you're talking about.
There are psychopaths. There are people. Look, I have many a times said that most of the people doing some of these things are not even in government. You see, party supporters have put on themselves this thing of, it's our government. So, they are the ones. So for me, like I said, look, I'm not in Manasseh's shoes, and I sympathize with how he feels, because if everybody feels unsafe, look, right. I've been engaged on radio and TV for about 10 years now.
Right.
If at any point in time, because of my commentary, I feel unsafe, then it will be a problem. So if he is doing journalism, and I appreciate the journalism he does, because I think investigative journalism in Ghana is missing. Most 90% of journalism in Ghana is people chasing what the political people are saying. Only a few people are really picking a story, investigate it, put it out there, and just bring a discourse. So, look, perception is what it is. But I think the government should do more to basically make people feel safer, even if it is just a perception. But I think, Upon Kroma listened to your program a lot, and I think he, being a former journalism, should do more to make people feel safer.
All right. And just to wrap the conversation on that bit, when you look at the trend and things that have happened, even in terms of the criminal libel law, which was repealed, and some of the actions and what is being used now in terms of, conduct offensive to the peace and some of the things we're seeing now with posts on social media and all of that, it leaves a lot to be desired. But I had a question that I posed earlier. Who determines how free the media is? Media people or maybe the politicians? Are they to tell us whether we feel free or not? And the second bit, you mentioned that sometimes it is not these parties. I agree. It is not everything, every atrocity committed by some person that is from the party. Maybe some overzealous party member goes and does certain things. I agree with you. But how do they rein in these people? What happens after these people have stepped out of line? That is important, isn't it?
Yes, very important. That's why I raised that when these things come up, how it's dealt with. So,
Right.
I mean, when somebody feels that they've been threatened, and in the first question that you now mentioned, how free? Look, let's also just oppose this conversation on the fact that social media is playing a lot of role in what goes out there. Now, people are hiding behind social media and basically putting faceless things out there that naturally you can't put out in print media, okay? Now, look, it basically unsettles the environment. Print media journalism and electronic media journalism, like the radio and television, are more sanitized.
Right.
Now, social media, it's not. People will just they will doctor things and put it out there as the truth. And people honestly believe it because they will go and take the emblem, they will go and take the letterhead, they will go and make this and put it out there. Now, that is what is unsettling the situation. For me, I think there should be more punitive actions against people on social media who are putting out fake news and untruth.
Right.
Okay? Because that is really unsettling the media space, though it is not traditional media. It has come to be the mainstay of how a lot of these information also get across. So the freedom, really and truly, your personal freedom is where your nose ends.
Right.
Okay? So if you are doing something that is offending the next person, I think that people should go to court on individual levels to say that, look, you've done this to me. I feel that...
And that precisely is the point. People feel that where some people have been arrested, incarcerated for periods, we should have simply used the law. You've insulted someone like the First Lady. If you feel aggrieved, the right place to go is the court, not for people to be apprehended and all sorts of things to happen. But to move the conversation forward, just very quickly on this, you're aspiring to be president of this country. You're aspiring to be flag bearer of the NPP. What would you, given the opportunity, do differently in terms of media freedom? What would you do differently?
Well, for me, I think that I will crack very hard on social media on truth, and because now
you would go hard on social media.
Oh no, on truth and fake news. Okay, because that is what is distorting the space.
Right.
Now we're going to have digitization where everybody who's going to have a mobile number is going to have a Ghana card to go with it. Okay? So it's easier to track these things which is put on social media. Now, people don't seem to realize that social media is a footprint. If you upload something, they can find you. In Ghana, CID has a unit that can track whoever posted whatever on social media.
Right.
So for me, I think if you sanitize and basically bring punitive actions to clear the untruth and the fake news and the manipulation of events on social media, the print media...
But what is fake news? I mean, how do you arrest people for if they genuinely felt something was right at the time of posting and all of that? Are you not going to take us back to the era of the criminal libel law?
It's not somebody sharing an opinion. What I'm talking about is people actually taking letterheads, which are not true, to publish things. People actually manipulating Twitter accounts to put information out there only to check it's not true. I'll give you a typical example. There was a time that His Excellency John, JDF, John Dramani Mahama, there was a Twitter information put out there. I went to his Twitter page and it wasn't there. But they designed the Twitter page to make it look like that tweet came from him. Those things are malicious. And I think those are the things that we should stop the youth from doing. Okay. And it is a trend that is coming up. Okay? People are able to even do letterhead of communication to put information out there only for the government to come out and say that, look, this is fake news. Those are malicious. So for me, I think if you crack down on that space, which is social media, you crack down on that, then the print media is more sanitized. And because, look, let me give you an example. Most things being printed on online and print media is now emanating from Facebook and these other places.
Right.
Okay? So there are some things that are not true, but because the person sees the source on social media, they also print it. Okay? Because I've said that 24-hour news media is difficult because you need to find information every minute to keep your viewers or your watchers attractive to your page or to your online portal. So people are searching for information all over. So somebody could put fake news on Facebook, then somebody will pick it up and print it as truth. But it's not.
So your point is clear on that. Should we give you the nod? Should your party give you the nod? And should ordinary Ghanaians give you the nod? You would crack down on untruths on social media.
On social media, yes.
Right.
That for me is very disturbing.
Let's look at some other stories from the rest of the papers in the next few minutes. Nonuplets in perfect health on first birthday. The BBC has been carrying the story about Moroccan nonuplets. 9. Yeah, a 26-year-old woman gave birth to them, and I listened to their father yesterday, Abdelkader Abi, an officer in the Malian army. It's not been easy dealing with 9 babies at the same time, a year on. You can check out that story on page 5 of the Ghanaian Times newspaper. The Daily Guide, and I'll go through the papers very quickly because the rest of them basically go back to what we've already mentioned. Supreme Court boots NDC's 7-0 over Elevy, and churches in Accra excluded from ban on drumming and noise making. There's also Young Democrats honor Nana, and beware of Mahama Elevy scam. Quickly on that, John Dramani Mahama and the NDC say they will quash the Elevy should they, assume the reins of power in 2025. Is that objective? Is that patriotic? What do you think about it? Is it the right thing to do?
You come and speak to the numbers. Look, I put something out in the social media a couple of days ago, and it's on Ghana Web, and I said that, look, if we are at a crossroads, John Dramani Mahama, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, is not the one that will ask for direction, because he's led us on the wrong path before, and I don't think we can go back to him to ask to show us the direction as crossroads. Okay? Now, in the Elevy conversation, if they claim, and that's their stand, and they want to put their hand on it that they will scrap Elevy, my question is, how would they make up the revenue shortfall? This talk of cutting losses and cutting and all those things does not make up the revenue shortfall. Because, you see, there are two sides of the conversation that I have always said. There's revenue and there's
pointed out, Kojo. They've pointed out, like you have pointed out in the past, that there are alternative streams of revenue for the state,
yes,
and that electronic revenue should never have been taxed in the first place.
Yes, and yes, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is that if you want to scrap the Elevy is going to bring in revenue. So what alternative revenue would you bring in? You saying that you're going to basically cut expenditure and not do that and not do that. What, as a government, if John Dramani Mahama was to come into office today, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is to come to office today, he will only have 17 billion as money in his kitty that he has to spend.
Right.
Okay, because a possible revenue is 70 billion. Tax interest on loans is 24 billion. Salary, government wage bill is 32 billion. That makes it 56 billion. Out of the 70 billion, you only have 14 billion as your expenditure. If you are going to take out Elevy, my question to him is that how do you want to raise extra revenue? How are you going to do that? Okay? So That is the question they should answer. If you take out and you're going to scrap Elevy, fine, we'll clap for you. But how do you raise the extra revenue? Because you need the extra revenue.
Right.
The existing revenue will not be enough for you to rule this nation if you intend to do any developmental agenda for the country.
Okie doke. Let's take a quick look at this comment coming through from Solomon Nyantechi. And he says, while I cannot blame those who believe our Supreme Court operates in a predictable environment, I believe that those who file cases there, particularly the NDC, should bring not only lawyers, but at least some evidence. The AG was able to demonstrate, mind you, this is what he says, the AG was able to demonstrate that Parliament had a quorum for the Elevy's approval last night, but the NDC lawyer failed to show his numbers in court. Please don't think that if you lose, it will just feed into general perception and that there will be no preparation or nothing. So this person is saying the NDC has been shambolic. You don't prepare properly. You go to court. You don't have the evidence, and you expect the case to go in your favor. So he's saying the NDC is doing a poor job in court. That is what he is saying right there. The Daily Statesman, NPP cautions against Mahama's scam Elevy promise. And President Akufo-Addo receives Africa Peace Award, and government seeks to improve on press freedom. Maybe we should do that story on page 2. So it says, The Young Democrat Union of Africa has conferred the Africa Peace Award on President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo for his enormous contribution to the growth and sustenance of peace and freedoms, not just in Ghana, but the West African sub-region and Africa as a whole. The award was presented on behalf of the union by Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister of Canada and chairman of the International Democrat Union, who was assisted by Mrs. Louisa Atta-Agyemang, president of the YDUA. So we are receiving an Africa Peace Award, the CEO of our country doing so. In the meantime, press freedom not going so well. We'll put that side by side. But let me just find out from you. It's interesting because in recent times, Kojo, we've heard from the Ashanti Regional Minister, Simon Osei-Mensah, who says a lot of the rot we're seeing in the country has to do with Christians. And come to think of it, consider our leaders throughout our history. Our presidents have always been Christian. People sometimes erroneously reference Liman. He was not Muslim, so to speak. He had his own mix of things going on, respectfully putting it. But he was not Muslim. So we've never had a Muslim leader. You put that also side by side with what we're hearing now. There's also the chairperson of the Kumasi Presbytery of the Global Evangelical Church, who is blaming corruption in Ghana on the failure of the church to impact the lives of its members. Are these calls justified when they say that we, Christians, are to blame for not just corruption, but where our country is?
Well, I honestly, it's a difficult conversation that takes a long time to digest. I will take it from this angle. If you are to go to Islamic states, hardly do we have a lot of Islamic states that are practicing democracy the way we are practicing it. Mostly Christian countries practice the democracy that we are practicing. And the level of press freedom you want, the level of liberties that we want, all those things is normally within Christian countries. Now, are Christians faith, people who follow the Christianity faith, are they a good example of what we should be in society? That conversation me and you can have for like 10 days and we'll still not get to the answer. I have a simple take. Politics and religion are cousins, okay? They have both piggybacked each other at every point in time in history. There are times when religion has brought politics to a certain point, and there are times that politics have brought religion also to a certain point. People feel confident in their faith, and they think that the faith to God is where it ends. But you see, we hold dear one book, which we call the Bible. I honestly believe that too much emphasis is put on what is written in the Bible than an individual doing right by himself and by his neighbor.
Right.
Okay? So everybody you can justify any action in this world from the Bible, be it Old Testament or the New Testament. Slavery was justified in the Bible. Okay? When the Southern
within a certain context.
Say it again.
Within a certain context.
Within a certain context, yes, but the Bible,
just as polygamy was justified in the Bible within a certain context, in the New Testament, Jesus would come and say it was only allowed because of your stiff-neckedness.
There are in the Bible that you could probably, somebody will probably justify to you why he can sleep with a lady and not necessarily marry that lady. And you go to Deuteronomy and it's there. Okay, so there is everything in the Bible. And that is why it's a very, 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 very controversial book that we have.
Right.
So people take it and basically use a path that favors them to basically go to the altar. Now, this level of leadership, let's look at the so-called pastors that we have today. Some pastors, okay?
Right.
Some so very extreme in this country, but some not so great.
Okay.
Let's be honest. So if we have a church or we have faith, that the leadership of the church itself is compromised in certain aspects of it, then it's to us. Because we've seen all sorts of acts, people actually putting people on the floor, people doing all sorts of manners and using the Bible as a justification. So for me, if you want to have that discussion that Christians are the most corrupt or the people corrupt, it's a conversation that's dicey. But for me, I just think that the common goal that everybody should have is do right by yourself and treat thy neighbor as thyself.
All right, the golden rule. Well, thank you, Kojo, for joining us, for doing right by us and joining us, though we had to reach out to you rather late. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful day.
Very much.
All right, that was Kojo Poku, energy analyst. And just before we wrap up, one last comment. Kwame Anojo says, the sad part too is that the NDC is not even prepared for power. Certainly, it's likely the NDC will not win the election in 2024 because the MPP will do everything possible to break the 8. We'll see how that cookie crumbles in 2024. But right before we go, we have a very special one we have to do. Danicia Ajwa Poma Ajay. She celebrates her silver jubilee today. And it is indeed a beautiful day. Poma is right here with us at the Multimedia Group. We celebrate you for who you are, what you stand for, and for the many smiles you put on our faces. Happy birthday, Danicia Ajwa Poma Ajay. And we wish you the best of this year and the years to come. Up next, we have sports with Oreku Ampofo. And last night, hey! Oh, I'll never support Manchester City again. I'm a die-hard Red Devils fan. I decided to support Manchester City. And the decisions after 70 minutes, God bless Kyle Walker. As for Pep Guardiola, you can walk away. Sports is up next. Tuesday.